In corporate America, arrogance comes with a heavy price tag. For my former boss, that cost was $250,000, a collapsing freight network, and the destruction of his ego. When they fired me to save a few pennies with automated software, they expected me to beg. They had no idea I was the only one holding the keys to their legal survival. I just smiled, handed over the rope, and watched them hang themselves. Hello and welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. We are so incredibly grateful for your continued support of our channel. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the operating budget to upload new videos here for the foreseeable future. So we will be transitioning our operations to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story, please support us by joining our Patreon community, where you can listen to exclusive, true stories that are even better, longer, and packed with detailed situations we cannot publicize on YouTube, featuring multiple emotional voice actors bringing the characters to life. And you can join us right now by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment of this video. Now, let us dive right into today's story about a brilliant professional named Vivian Scott. I was 34 years old and held the title of Senior Specialist in Federal Safety Certification at Vanguard Apex Freight. If you have never heard of Vanguard Apex, imagine a massive logistics empire dedicated strictly to moving the things that can either save a city or level a city block. We transported volatile medical chemicals, biohazardous materials, and industrial-grade corrosives across state lines. The federal government does not take lightly to 400 trucks filled with explosive potential roaming the highways unmonitored. It was exactly 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon when I received an urgent calendar invite. The classic corporate execution hour. Human Resources always schedules terminations at the end of the week, so you have the weekend to cool off and cannot cause a scene with your coworkers. I walked into the glass-walled conference room. Derek Sterling, our regional chief executive officer, sat at the head of the mahogany table. He had one leg crossed over the other, showing off a pair of Italian leather loafers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Next to him sat my direct manager, Chloe Maddox. Chloe was the kind of middle management parasite who spent her entire career taking credit for other people's late nights and hard work. She had always despised the fact that my position required a level of federal clearance she could never attain, granting me total independence from her daily micromanagement. Sitting quietly at the end of the table was Patricia Rollins from Human Resources, clutching a thick manila folder like it was a protective shield. Derek cleared his throat, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket. He did not even offer me a seat. He simply launched into a rehearsed, sterile corporate monologue about budget restructuring, shifting market dynamics, and streamlining operational redundancies. The bottom line was painfully simple. They were firing me, effective immediately. He proudly announced that they had purchased a shiny new automated management software system that promised to do the jobs of 10 people for a fraction of the cost. Chloe leaned forward, unable to hide the gleeful, arrogant smirk plastered across her perfectly made-up face. "It is nothing personal, Vivian," she purred, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But with the new artificial intelligence integration, the software can handle all of your little paperwork tasks in mere seconds. We just do not have the budget to justify a human salary for something a computer program can do automatically." I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not beg for my job or try to explain my worth. I stood completely still, my face a mask of absolute chilling calm. I let my eyes drift from Chloe's smug expression to the large desk calendar sitting in front of Derek. Today was Friday. I knew, with absolute and terrifying certainty, that the federal security encryption license for our entire fleet of 400 trucks was set to expire at exactly midnight on Sunday. Chloe called it paperwork. That was how remarkably ignorant she was regarding the lifeblood of the company she supposedly managed. It was not a simple document you could just digitally sign or let an artificial intelligence scan. It was a rigorous federal security mandate to prevent domestic terrorism, requiring physical authentication. Patricia nervously slid the severance agreement across the polished wood table. I picked up the heavy document, scanning the standard legal jargon. Then, I looked directly into Patricia's eyes. My voice was steady and quiet, carrying a cold weight that made her flinch. "I will sign this," I said, "but only if you add a specific addendum right now. I want it stated clearly, in writing, that all authority and responsibility for monitoring federal certification is fully transferred to Derek and Chloe effective immediately." Derek scoffed, rolling his eyes as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Fine," he snapped, waving his hand dismissively at the human resources representative. "Type it up. Patricia, if it makes her feel better about leaving, just put it in. Let us get this over with." Chloe chuckled softly, clearly believing I was just desperately trying to inflate my own importance on my way out the door. Patricia typed frantically on her laptop, printed the revised page, and pushed it back toward us. Derek and Chloe grabbed their expensive pens and eagerly scribbled their signatures on the dotted line. They did not even bother to read the exact wording. They were too drunk on their own perceived power, completely blind to the fact that they had just signed a legally binding confession. I signed my name, neatly and deliberately. I handed the pen back, turned on my heel, and walked out of the conference room. I packed the few personal belongings on my desk into a small cardboard box. As I walked out of the glass doors of Vanguard Apex Freight for the last time, I held my head high. I left behind a dead, sterile silence in the office, and a ticking time bomb that was only 56 hours away from detonating. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp, overcast chill typical of Seattle. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, I sat at the kitchen island of my downtown apartment, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and logged into the mandatory handover video call. I had promised a smooth transition, and I was going to deliver a masterclass in malicious compliance. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for, following every single one of their rigid corporate procedures to the absolute letter. On my screen, 2 video tiles popped up. One was a junior technician from the Information Technology Department, looking thoroughly exhausted. The other tile belonged to Chloe, who appeared visibly annoyed that her Saturday morning was being interrupted by a task she deemed beneath her. She sat in what looked like her home office, sipping from a massive mug, her expression radiating impatient arrogance. "Let us make this quick, Vivian," Chloe said, not even bothering with a greeting. "The new software is already indexing the servers. Just hand over the master passwords and the administrator credentials." "Of course, Chloe. I am happy to help," I replied, my voice perfectly level. The absolute picture of a cooperative professional. I shared my screen and began methodically walking them through the digital architecture of Vanguard Apex Freight's compliance framework. I transferred the master encryption keys. I handed over the login credentials for the state-level tracking portals. I uploaded every single digital training manual and standard operating procedure document into Chloe's personal directory. I made sure the information technology technician recorded every transfer, explicitly documenting that I was surrendering full control of the network. But digital access was only half the battle. Corporate America always makes the fatal mistake of believing that software can solve physical world problems. I opened the final, most critical folder on my screen. It was highlighted in bright red. "Everything is transferred," I said, keeping my tone helpful and informative. "However, there is one critical item we must discuss regarding the federal tracking systems. The DOE T-74 security protocol requires physical authentication with a hardware FOB this weekend to maintain the operational licenses for the fleet." I held up the small, black encrypted USB device to my web camera so she could see it. It was the physical key provided by the Department of Transportation. I had already left it on her desk the night before, sealed in an envelope marked urgent. Chloe rolled her eyes so hard I could see the whites of them through the pixelated video feed. "Vivian, please," she sighed loudly, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "We are moving to a fully automated cloud infrastructure. We do not use outdated plastic flash drives anymore. The artificial intelligence system handles all federal reporting pings automatically. You really need to let go of this desperate need to make your outdated manual processes sound complicated. Chloe, the federal government does not use our cloud. I stated clearly, ensuring the call recording captured every word. The artificial intelligence cannot bypass a physical security lock. If that FOB is not physically inserted into the main server terminal and manually authenticated by midnight on Sunday, the system will cut her off, Chloe snapped, waving her hand at her screen as if swatting away a fly. She looked directly at the technician's video tile. Revoke her network access right now. We have everything we need. She is just trying to confuse us and stall the handover. Are you sure, ma'am? The technician asked hesitantly. She was in the middle of explaining the authentication sequence. I said cut her off, Chloe barked. Before I could utter another syllable to explain exactly how to run the decryption sequence, my screen flashed gray. A large banner declaring access denied appeared across my monitor. The video call abruptly terminated. They had locked me out. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. They had successfully disarmed the only person capable of defusing the bomb, entirely of their own free will. But a true practitioner of malicious compliance always leaves a paper trail. I immediately opened my personal laptop, using my still active corporate email client on my phone. I drafted one final, meticulously worded message to Chloe, copying the Human Resources Department and blind copying my own personal email address for my permanent legal records. The email read, "This is to officially confirm that I have handed over all digital systems, passwords, and administrative controls exactly as requested during our recorded video conference. The maintenance of all operational logistics and federal licenses now belongs exclusively to Chloe Maddox. I highly recommend checking the physical DO T-74 protocol instructions left on your desk to ensure the fleet remains operational past this weekend." I hit send. I walked over to the kitchen counter and waited. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a reply from Chloe. It contained exactly one word. Noted? I stared at that single word, marveling at the sheer, breathtaking magnitude of her stupidity. With those 5 letters, she had officially hammered the final nail into the coffin of her own career. She had acknowledged receipt of the warning and explicitly chosen to ignore it. My hands were completely clean. I closed my phone and powered it down entirely. I walked over to my wine rack, selected a beautiful, rich Cabernet Sauvignon I had been saving for a special occasion, and poured myself a generous glass. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, looking out over the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. I took a slow sip of the dark red wine, feeling completely weightless. For the first time in 5 years, I was not on call. I did not have to worry about hazardous materials, federal auditors, or incompetent managers. I turned off every single alarm and notification in my apartment. I was about to enjoy the most spectacular, uninterrupted weekend of my entire life, peacefully counting down the hours and minutes until midnight on Sunday. The weekend passed in a state of absolute blissful serenity. No frantic emails, no emergency dispatch calls, just the sound of rain against my windows and the deep, restorative sleep of someone who knew exactly what was coming. Sunday night crept in, bringing a heavy, quiet darkness over Seattle. At precisely 1 minute past midnight on Monday morning, the invisible digital tether connecting Vanguard Apex Freight to the Department of Homeland Security officially severed. The federal license encryption, lacking the physical hardware validation I had explicitly warned them about, quietly expired. In the eyes of the United States government, our massive logistics company vanished from the grid. The Federal Automated Tracking System sent its scheduled security ping to our servers. It received nothing but dead silence in return. That was all it took. When you are hauling highly volatile medical chemicals and biohazardous waste across state lines, a sudden loss of global positioning system signals is not treated as a technical glitch. It is treated as a potential domestic terrorism threat. Out on Interstate 80 in the pitch black of night, a veteran Vanguard Apex driver named Hank was hauling 3 tons of industrial corrosives. He never even saw the dashboard warning light. The federal security protocol bypassed the company's internal software entirely and triggered an immediate, remote engine lockdown. Hank's massive 18-wheeler hissed, sputtered, and completely died in the middle of the dark highway. The steering column locked heavily into place. The air brakes engaged automatically with a violent jolt. Multiply Hank's terrifying situation across the entire country, from the freezing highways of the Midwest to the desolate desert roads of Nevada. 400 massive trucks simultaneously went completely dark. 400 ticking time bombs carrying hazardous materials were suddenly stranded on the shoulders of interstates, blocking critical way stations and sitting dead in the water. Within 15 minutes, state highway patrols initiated a coordinated, aggressive response. Sirens shattered the quiet night in dozens of states. Troopers in high-visibility jackets approached the stranded vehicles with their hands resting cautiously on their holstered weapons, treating every single truck as a hostile situation. When the officers scanned the hazardous material placards and ran the company credentials through the National Law Enforcement Database, the system flashed a blaring, red invalid status, transporting hazardous materials without a valid, active federal tracking license is a severe federal offense. The troopers immediately began writing citations. They informed the terrified, confused drivers that the company was now incurring a fine of $50,000 per hour per truck for violating national security transport laws. Back in my apartment, on the mahogany nightstand next to my bed, my cell phone began to light up. The screen illuminated the dark bedroom with a silent, frantic rhythm. It was a relentless barrage of incoming communications, a dozen missed calls from human resources, 20 desperate, back-to-back dials from Chloe, a flood of unknown numbers from panicking regional managers across the coast. But I had engaged the strict do not disturb mode on my device long before my head hit the pillow. I was wrapped in a heavy down comforter, breathing slowly, lost in a deep and dreamless sleep while the corporate world burned down around them. While I slept peacefully, the Vanguard Apex Regional Headquarters had transformed into an absolute war zone. Marcus Thorne, a senior logistics coordinator and one of the few neutral colleagues who always treated me with basic respect, was working the graveyard shift. He would later send me a detailed text message describing the sheer, unfiltered panic that erupted on the operations floor. According to Marcus, all 20 massive monitoring screens on the dispatch wall simultaneously flashed critical failure warnings. The room was instantly bathed in the harsh, red glare of error notifications. Chloe, who had been frantically called in by the terrified night crew, was standing in the center of the room, completely unraveled. She was violently clicking her mouse, pounding her fists on the keyboard, and screaming at the exhausted information technology staff. "Just use the artificial intelligence!" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing sharply off the glass walls. "Tell the software to reboot the tracking modules." The lead night shift technician stared at her in utter disbelief, his face pale. "I cannot do that, Chloe. The artificial intelligence is completely blind. It is locked out of the federal gateway. The government servers are demanding a physical hardware key decryption. We do not have the code, and the software cannot generate one." Chloe collapsed into a rolling office chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably in front of her entire team. The shiny new automated system she had weaponized against me just 2 days prior was entirely useless. It was nothing but a glorified calculator trying to negotiate with the Department of Homeland Security. Derek Sterling burst through the double doors of the control room a few minutes later, still wearing his pajama pants under a hastily thrown-on trench coat. His usual arrogant, polished swagger was completely gone, replaced by the manic, sweating terror of a man watching his entire career evaporate in real time. "What is happening?" Derek demanded, grabbing Marcus roughly by the shoulder. "Why are the state police calling my personal cell phone threatening to impound our fleet?" "The federal security licenses expired at midnight, sir," Marcus replied evenly, pointing a finger at the sea of flashing red on the monitors. "The government locked down the entire fleet to prevent a security breach. We are currently racking up fines of approximately $20 million every single hour. These trucks remain paralyzed on the road." Derek turned a sickly shade of gray. He desperately tried to control the narrative, grabbing a desk phone to call the corporate board members on the East Coast. He paced the floor frantically, furiously trying to spin the unmitigated disaster as an unexpected computer glitch. A malicious cyber attack. Absolutely anything to deflect the blame away from his own catastrophic incompetence. He was desperately trying to cover up the truth before senior leadership woke up and realized that millions of dollars were vanishing into thin air with every tick of the clock. He did not know that the undeniable truth was already documented, signed, and waiting in an inbox to destroy him in the morning. And as Derek sweat through his expensive clothes in that freezing control room, I simply rolled over in my warm bed, pulling the soft blankets a little tighter, ready to wake up to a profoundly entertaining Monday. By 8 o'clock on Monday morning, the Seattle Regional Branch was suffocating under a thick blanket of pure, unadulterated terror. The glass-walled conference room, the exact same room where they had gleefully executed my career just 3 days prior, was now a corporate tribunal. Julian Cross, the chief executive officer of our parent conglomerate, had taken a private jet straight from Chicago in the middle of the night. Julian was a man who did not tolerate failure. He was a ruthless corporate shark, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, pacing the length of the mahogany table like a predator evaluating its cornered prey. The air in the room was so thick with tension it could choke you. Derek sat at the table, his usually pristine hair disheveled, nervously loosening his silk tie. Chloe was beside him, her face completely drained of color, staring fixedly at the polished wood. "I want an explanation." Julian's voice was deathly quiet, a soft, dangerous rumble that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. "I have state troopers in 20 different jurisdictions threatening to impound a fleet worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The fines are currently bleeding us dry at a rate that will bankrupt this regional division by Tuesday. So, Derek, I suggest you start talking." Derek swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically. He leaned forward, attempting to summon his usual manipulative charm, but it came out sounding like the desperate plea of a drowning man. "Julian, this was an act of malicious corporate sabotage," Derek lied, his voice shaking. "We terminated a disgruntled employee on Friday afternoon, Vivian Scott. She was our safety certification specialist. Clearly, she could not handle the restructuring. Out of pure spite, she bypassed the artificial intelligence system and deliberately corrupted the federal tracking gateways before she left the building. We are doing everything we can to patch the software, but she designed the lockdown to hold us hostage." Chloe nodded aggressively, playing the role of the innocent victim perfectly. "It is true, Mr. Cross," she chimed in, her voice shrill. She refused to cooperate during the transition. She intentionally hid the access protocols from my team to orchestrate this exact disaster. We had absolutely no idea she was planning to destroy the network. It was a beautifully orchestrated performance. Under normal circumstances, corporate executives would easily buy the narrative of the bitter, destructive former employee, but they had forgotten about the audience. At the far end of the table, Patricia Rollins from Human Resources was physically vibrating with panic. She knew that when a catastrophe of this magnitude occurred, heads rolled from the top down. She was not about to let Derek and Chloe use her as a human shield. Driven by pure, primal self-preservation, Patricia abruptly stood up, her hands trembling as she plugged her laptop into the room's main projector. "That is an absolute lie," Patricia blurted out, her voice cracking. The massive screen on the wall flickered to life. Projected in 10-foot tall, undeniably clear letters was the digitized copy of my severance agreement. Patricia zoomed in specifically on the custom addendum I had demanded at the very bottom of the page. "Vivian Scott did not sabotage anything," Patricia stated, her voice gaining strength as she pointed at the screen. "She explicitly demanded that this clause be added before she would leave the premises. Look at the text." Julian Cross stopped pacing. He turned his piercing gaze to the projector screen and read the clause aloud, his voice dripping with venom. "All authority and responsibility for monitoring federal certification is fully transferred to Derek Sterling and Chloe Maddox, effective immediately." Julian turned slowly toward Derek, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "And right below that ironclad legal transfer of liability, I see both of your signatures. You signed off on this." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, but no sound came out. Before Derek could attempt another pathetic excuse, The heavy oak doors of the conference room swung open. Marcus Thorne strode in. He did not ask for permission. He walked straight up to the head of the table and slammed a thick stack of freshly printed emails directly onto the desk in front of Julian. "Mr. Cross, my name is Marcus Thorne, Senior Logistics Coordinator," he said firmly. "I think you need to see these. This is the complete digital paper trail of Vivian Scott's handover process from Saturday morning, recorded by our Information Technology Department." Julian picked up the stack of papers. The room was so silent you could hear the rustle of the pages turning. Marcus had printed everything. The transcript of the video call where Chloe explicitly ordered the technician to lock me out. And resting right on top was the final, devastating email I had sent. "Julian, read my explicit warning about the DOE T74 physical hardware authentication." Then, his eyes dropped to the single, fatal reply from Chloe. "Noted," Julian whispered, reading her response. He looked up, staring at Chloe with a mixture of profound disgust and absolute disbelief. "She handed you the exact instructions to prevent this meltdown on a silver platter. She warned you in writing, and your response to a federal security mandate was a one-word dismissal?" Chloe shrank back into her leather chair, tears of sheer panic finally welling up in her eyes. "I thought she was just trying to make her job seem complicated," she whimpered, completely abandoning her previous lie. "The artificial intelligence vendor promised us that the new software would handle all government compliance automatically." "The government does not care about your software vendor. You absolute imbecile," Julian roared, finally losing his icy composure. His fist slammed down on the mahogany table with the force of a gunshot, making everyone in the room physically jump. Julian took a deep, ragged breath, pinching the bridge of his nose as the catastrophic reality of the situation fully materialized in his mind. He looked at the executives with eyes completely devoid of mercy. "You fools do not even realize the true scale of what you have done," Julian said, his voice dropping back to a terrifyingly calm register. "This is not just about state trooper fines. I just got off the phone with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, because our fleet is hauling volatile biochemicals without active monitoring. They are treating this as a Level 1 domestic security threat. If we do not have a federally certified expert input the physical override codes to restore the network within the next 12 hours, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will permanently revoke Vanguard Apex's operating licenses. They will shut down this entire company forever." The blood completely drained from Derek's face. The reality of federal prison time suddenly loomed over him like a suffocating shadow. Julian grabbed the stack of printed emails, walked over to Derek, and violently threw the heavy papers directly into his chest. The papers fluttered across the floor like dead leaves. "You just fired the only person on this entire planet who holds the specific security clearance required to save this company," Julian snarled, leaning down so his face was mere inches from Derek's sweating forehead. "You have exactly 1 hour to get her on the phone and beg her to come back. If you fail, I will personally see to it that both of you are thrown into federal prison for criminal corporate negligence. Make the call." I was sitting at my favorite corner table in a quiet artisanal coffee shop down the street from my apartment, enjoying a perfectly crafted caramel macchiato. It was exactly 9 o'clock on Monday morning. I decided it was finally time to disable the Do Not Disturb feature on my phone. The device immediately flooded with notifications, but before I could even review them, an incoming call flashed across the screen. It was the main conference room line from Vanguard Apex Freight. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, let it ring 3 times to let them sweat, and swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice as smooth and unbothered as the jazz music playing softly in the background of the cafe. "Vivian, thank God." Derek's voice echoed through the speaker. He was clearly on speakerphone in the boardroom. He tried to force a tone of warm, professional camaraderie, but the underlying panic made his voice tremble. "Listen, Vivian, we seem to have run into a minor technical hiccup with the fleet network this morning. I know we had a bit of a misunderstanding on Friday, but I'm reaching out to you as a colleague. We really need your help to get the system back online. We are a team, right?" I let a heavy, suffocating silence hang on the line for a few seconds. I wanted everyone in that room to feel the absolute void of my sympathy. "Derek, We are not a team, I replied, articulating every word with razor-sharp precision. We have not been a team since Friday at 4 o'clock, when you and Chloe smugly fired me to save a few pennies. You told me an artificial intelligence program could do my job in seconds. So, I highly suggest you ask the software to negotiate with the federal government for you. I do not work for you anymore. Have a wonderful day. Wait, do not hang up. A new, incredibly commanding voice barked through the speaker, shoving Derek's pathetic whining aside. Vivian, this is Julian Cross, Chief Executive Officer of the parent conglomerate. Good morning, Julian, I said coolly. I knew exactly who he was, and I knew exactly why he was in Seattle. I imagine your morning is significantly more stressful than mine. Let us skip the corporate theatrics, Vivian, Julian said, his tone entirely strictly business. I know exactly what my incompetent management team did to you, and I am personally overturning your termination. I need this network restored right now. If you drive back to this office and input the physical override, I will immediately promote you to Director of Federal Compliance. I will give you 3 times your previous salary, a dedicated corner office, and complete autonomy. Just get down here and fix this. It was a spectacular offer, a desperate, blank check from a billionaire trying to save his empire. But Julian, despite his authority, was still operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. I decline, Julian, I stated flatly. There was a stunned gasp from someone in the background, likely Chloe. Excuse me? Julian's voice hardened. I just offered you the highest position in the regional department and triple your pay. You are not going to get a better offer than this, Vivian. Do not push your luck. You are fundamentally misunderstanding the leverage in this room. Julian, I said, taking another calm sip of my coffee. You believe you are offering me my job back. But Vanguard Apex Freight does not own the security protocols required to move those hazardous materials. I do. What are you talking about? Julian demanded, the confusion evident in his sharp tone. The company holds the logistics license. The company holds the commercial transport license, I corrected him, dropping the hammer. But the DOTI 74 Federal Security Certification is a Level 1 Homeland Defense credential. The United States government does not issue that specific clearance to faceless corporations. They issue it to rigorously vetted, independent security experts. That certificate is registered under my personal name, tied to my social security number, and linked to my unique biometric hardware key. Vanguard Apex was merely leasing my credentials while I was an employee. When Derek fired me on Friday, he did not just terminate my employment. He legally severed your company's only authorized bridge to the Department of Homeland Security. Dead silence fell over the conference room line. The realization crashed down upon them like a physical weight. I had total control. So, Julian, I will not be returning as an employee for any amount of money, I continued, dictating my terms with absolute authority. I am willing to offer you a single, emergency consulting contract. The duration of this contract will be exactly 24 hours. Name your price, Julian said. His voice was completely defeated. He knew he was trapped. My fee is $250,000, I said smoothly. Cash, wired immediately into my personal account before I even touch a keyboard. But that is only the financial cost. There is one additional, non-negotiable condition. I have already drafted the contract and emailed it to your personal inbox. Julian, you will read the special clause on page 4. You will sign it, and you will email it back to me. If you try to negotiate, alter a single word, or delay the wire transfer by even 1 minute, I will hang up, throw my phone in the river, and let the Federal Bureau of Investigation dismantle your company piece by piece. I did not wait for a response. I kept the line open, listening to the frantic typing as Julian opened his email, knowing that the ultimate punishment for Derek and Chloe was buried perfectly within that legal document. Exactly 10 minutes after I hung up the phone, a notification chimed softly from my device. $250,000 had been successfully wired into my personal checking account. Your money has cleared, Julian, I announced, taking the call off hold. I flipped open my secure laptop and inserted the physical biometric key into the port. I navigated directly to the Federal Gateway portal, Click 1 to bypass the local Vanguard Apex server. Click 2 to inject my personal decryption sequence. Click 3 to broadcast the all-clear authentication signal to the National Global Positioning System network. From the moment the cash hit my account to the moment, 400 massive trucks roared back to life across the American highway system. Exactly 45 seconds had passed. The catastrophic legal crisis that had brought a multi-million-dollar logistics empire to its knees was entirely resolved before my coffee even got cold. "It is done," I stated calmly. "The fleet is moving." Julian exhaled a loud, heavy sigh of relief over the speaker. "Incredible. Listen, Vivian, I know we started off on the wrong foot today, but I want to keep you on a long-term retainer. Name your annual fee. I need someone actually competent managing this infrastructure." "I appreciate the offer, Julian, but I will be politely declining," I replied, a hint of genuine amusement in my voice. "I am using this $250,000 as seed money to launch my own independent logistics consulting firm. However, as per the special clause you just signed on page 4, Vanguard Apex will no longer require a high-level security specialist on payroll to keep the fleet moving." "What exactly does that clause entail?" Julian asked, his tone cautious. "I downgraded your local system to a legacy security loop," I explained. "It allows the trucks to operate without a registered expert on staff, but it requires a very specific manual authentication to renew the 24-hour rolling license. And per the legally binding terms you just agreed to, that manual authentication is now the explicit personal responsibility of Derek and Chloe." Julian read the document again, a low, dark chuckle echoed through the phone. He understood perfectly. Julian did not fire Derek and Chloe. Firing them would have been far too easy. A quick escape from their monumental failure. Instead, Julian wanted them to pay off the millions of dollars in fines they had caused through sheer, humiliating labor. They were immediately stripped of their executive titles, their corner offices, and their massive salaries. They were ruthlessly demoted to night shift compliance clerks. Now, every single day, at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, their alarms go off. Derek and Chloe have to log into the terminal and manually type out a 128-character alphanumeric encryption sequence to keep the trucks running. They cannot copy and paste it. They cannot automate it with their precious artificial intelligence. If they type a single character incorrectly, or if they are even 1 minute late, the entire fleet locks down again, and Julian will fire them on the spot with absolutely zero severance and a gross negligence lawsuit. A few weeks later, I took my brand new luxury sedan for a late-night drive through downtown Seattle. I cruised slowly past the Vanguard Apex Freight Building just after midnight. The massive glass structure was entirely dark, except for one single, lonely window illuminated on the 4th floor. I looked up at that harsh fluorescent light and allowed myself a soft, genuine smile. I did not destroy their company. I simply gave them exactly what they had arrogantly wished for on that Friday afternoon. They wanted a streamlined workflow without me in it. My silence had forced those arrogant executives to live inside a corporate hell of their own creation. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for tuning in and listening to today's story. We would love to know, where in the world are you listening to this story from right now? Please let us know in the comments below. If you found today's story satisfying and entertaining, we kindly remind you that YouTube has unfortunately demonetized our channel, meaning we will no longer be able to upload new videos here in the foreseeable future. We are transitioning fully to Patreon to keep the channel alive. Please help us continue producing content by joining our Patreon community, where you can listen to our absolute best, exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publicize on YouTube. You can join right now by scanning the Patreon QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the link provided in the description and the pinned comment below. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you over on Patreon.